So what book was the most fun to write of all the series, the Fablehaven, Dragon Watch, Beyonders? What specific book in the series, or Five Kingdoms, whichever one? Which one was the most fun?
The most fun to write. All time, like it's hard to say. For me, the most satisfying to write, which is the closest to the most fun for
Right.
me, was when I got to write book three of Beyonders. It has a very weird setup to Beyonders, and it has
Yes, it
really
is very
cool
cool.
payoffs in book three. Um,
I I feel it was the best ending of a series I've ever read, that like it just increased the overall quality of the series for me.
yeah, it's one of those stories where if someone read book one of Beyonders and
Yeah.
stopped there, they would have no idea what they missed
Yeah,
because
there's so much to experience that
because
yes.
that third book, see, usually when we write a series as an author, you want each book to be a pretty complete experience in and of
Right.
itself that escalates.
Yes.
So Fablehaven, each book in the Fablehaven series, each book is a fairly complete story that links and escalates in the series.
Right.
um Beyonders was written differently, where Beyonders is really one book divided into three parts.
Really it is.
Really, you know what I mean? And so if you read book one, you read the first third of the book. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, and that's not the best way to do a series, I don't think, but
Oh, but it
it's
was
just how that one
beautiful.
worked out. And
Yes.
so I had actually written book one of Beyonders before I wrote Fablehaven.
Oh. Oh
And
yes, it was going to be called like the other end of a hippo.
the other end of the hippo, yeah, good job. That's cool that you knew that. Yeah. And so I when I first wrote it, I just couldn't find anybody interested. And so
Right.
it was the Fablehaven concept that was my first book published, because they really got it, a publisher got really interested in the concept.
Yes.
But after I finished my Fablehaven books, I went back and rewrote Beyonders. And I was kind of heartsick that I wasn't able to continue Beyonders, because I had these really cool payoffs in mind for book three. And I was like,
Yes.
I might never get to write them. No one might ever know about them, but they're really cool. Like in my head, they were
Yes.
really cool. And so it was very satisfying when I found I got to write that whole story and write book three. And in some ways, book three, it might have been my biggest headache. It might have
Oh,
been my
was it?
hardest to
Because that's
write,
what I was going to ask, was what
because
was
there were
the
so
hardest
many
for
setups
you?
and payoffs in that series, and it was
So was
really
that the
hard
hardest then?
to make
Was book
everything
three of
track.
Beyonders?
And so, like, so that's why I say, like, I don't know if it was the most fun,
Okay.
but it was the most satisfying.
Satisfying.
I was really sad, like, I really badly wanted to be able to write that book, and so I was so
Nice.
satisfied when I was able to.
Nice. Well, excellent. So another question. Oh, I want to tell you really quick about Beyonders, because you did say
Sure.
it felt like, one book, all of the three. But when I was reading it out loud to my son, and a lot of it, without giving away things, is in the first book, especially. It's like the power of language, right? The power
Yeah,
of
sure.
a word. I'm trying to say it without saying it.
Yeah, like a magical
So
word that was part of the story. Yeah.
yes, this magical word. And so when the first book comes to an end, my son was like, he's on the edge of the seat. I love reading to him because he gets so into it, like visually, and he's on the edge of the, and he gasps. And it was just like, it wasn't even violent, but it was the power of language, and it still made him gasp in that excitement.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it
there's some
was really
shocking
cool.
stuff in Beyonders as far as surprising, right?
Right, right.
One of my goals with Beyonders, if you want to like know a little behind the scenes, was
Yes.
um I always find it, I can't help noticing that often in fantasy, um there are very convenient talismans sometimes that are almost overly convenient. Like this, I found this thing, and oh look, it works perfectly to solve the problem later in the. And I deliberately in Beyonders had some convenient seeming
Mhm.
talismans that did not pay off, that in different ways,
Yeah,
right? Like that,
right.
so that it would mimic real life a little bit more. Like there was also
Yeah.
some talismans that did pay off, but I wanted to keep the reader guessing a little bit, and there was definitely some, kind of like how you would have a red herring in a mystery. I had some almost red herring talismans in Beyonders, where the reader would be like, "Oh wait, I thought, well, that thing seemed the obvious thing to use
Yes.
here, but now it won't work." And to me, that was I took a certain kind of glee in sort of subverting a fantasy trope that way, you know.
Well, it was awesome. I thought that was a masterful piece of work. And I agree though. It did, like when I'd recommend it to somebody, I was like, but you just got to keep reading, because that's when you just appreciate it
Yeah.
so
I,
much as it comes
I
together.
tell Beyonder, I tell people who are going to read Beyonders, like, if you've read some of my other stuff and you've learned to trust me,
Right.
then yeah, try Beyonders. Or if it's like an adult friend who's never read me before,
Yes.
I'll say like, okay, here's the thing with Beyonders. It starts like Narnia, but it finishes like Lord of the Rings. And you
That's
got
good.
to, and as you transition into, like, it's starting really weird, and you're like, where is this
Yeah.
going? But as it transitions into broken heroes and kingdoms and battles and
Yes.
wars and just trust me, when you get to the end, all my adult friends like it the best, and
It's
of my stuff usually, and so
it is
especially if they're kind of into fantasy, like a lot of those guys like Beyonder's the best, and so I
such great
always
craft.
preface it with that, like, okay, you got to
Yes.
trust me, because I'll be like, where is this
Yes.
going? This is
And I'd be
weird.
like,
Does he have a plan? Is there a method to the
right,
madness?
right.
And it's definitely like my weirdest start with my coolest end, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes. That's what I tell people. I'm like, of all the books I've read, this is one that I just love the ending. It's just amazing.
Yeah, cool. I'm glad you felt that way.
Yes.
We have similar sensibilities
In
on our
line.
payoffs, it sounds like, yeah.
Excellent. So can you tell me about the moment? Because I've read some of, what you were doing to lead up to becoming an author, but what was the point when you were, getting stuff out, or I don't know,
Yeah.
at what point in your career were you able to sit back and say, hey, I think I can make this as a full-time career with writing?
Yeah. It's funny, you're almost never there unless you're in a
Right.
really rare club, because,
Well, you've got
I mean,
like
even
20
now,
something books out. Don't you feel that it take like having multiple series to feel like here? Or
here's the thing, like, to know I can make it a whole career,
right,
I still don't know. I still, if I have a couple series bomb,
right,
maybe I don't make it to 60 as a writer. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
right, right. Almost
And
like a baseball player that later you're going to become a coach and
yeah, that kind
something
of
like
thing.
that.
Like
Is
like
it,
like
are
like
you going to
like
have
can
to
I
get into marketing and
can I
some in the
keep
publishing?
playing in the game? Like, can I
Yeah.
sustain it the whole way?
Okay.
Can I write books that sell well enough that I can keep it my day job, right?
Right.
And so I think I'm there. I hope I stay there. I think
Right.
I'm getting better at what I do, and I think I know some of the stuff I have coming to me seems really good. Like,
Yes.
I've got a new series coming called The Forbidden Mountain through
Oh,
Random
excellent.
House that will be I think it'll be as good or better than anything I've done. I think I'm always
Awesome.
trying to take everything I've learned and pour it into the new series, right? And this is my first brand new series in a long time. It'll be my first series where it's entirely set in a fantasy world. It'll be 3 books,
Oh, cool.
and to me it seems really cool,
Yeah.
and I'll have to see how it goes. You know what I mean? So, like, a lot of it depends. Does the next series fly? Do people
Yeah.
is my judgment sound? Are people still going, yeah, I'm glad you're still writing. You've got fresh, cool stuff still in you.
Yes.
And if that stays true, which I hope stays true, then
Right.
yeah, maybe I'll make it to 70 as a writer, which is my,
Awesome.
I want to write my whole life. That's my goal. Um,
Excellent.
but so on the path of becoming a writer, kind of to answer your question, it was just this ongoing, like, okay, well, when I got Fablehaven published and it actually sold some books,
Yes.
I took this tentative step out of my day job into full-time writer,
Right.
knowing I might step back in 6 months to a full-time day job.
Right.
And I've never had to step back since then. And that to me was really exciting, because if you talked to my 25-year-old self toward the end of college,
Right.
I would have said, I will be really professionally satisfied if I can just write books and without letting down my family.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if I could provide for a family by writing books, I would call that a really successful life. It doesn't have to be in a mansion or in a space station I paid for with my,
Right.
billion selling book or something. It just had to be, if I could pay my way through life,
Be comfortable.
I would,
Yeah.
live a comfortable life as a writer. Like, to me, that was everything professionally that I'd hoped for. And
Yes.
and you're always a little worried it won't happen. But as that played out, and as I
Mhm.
was able to continue working full time as a writer and making enough money to live in a nice house and, have a normal life, I guess, or like a normal,
Yes.
nice life, like a nice
Yes.
suburban
Right.
life with a family, and I feel very professionally satisfied, like everything I hoped for,
Excellent.
and I like it as much as I hoped I would like it. I really enjoy sharing stories. If you gave me $1 billion, I would just keep doing the same job
What you get to
because
do.
it's what I like to do with my time. It's what is satisfying to me.
So when did you decide you wanted to be a writer? Was it something you wanted from childhood?
I knew I liked to make up stories from childhood.
Nice.
I knew in my head that's all my head liked to do. I did not like to write that much, and so I didn't at first think I'm going to write all these down. That seemed like a lot of work. You
And then
know,
the editing is a lot of work.
when you first try to write them down, when I first tried to write them down, it was like these stories are terrible. Like, because I didn't know how to communicate them through words yet. I saw
Right.
it
It's just
in my
in your
head like a
head.
movie kind of, right?
Yes.
I didn't know how to distill that down into words. And so I had to pay a lot of attention to how my favorite authors built their scenes and practice writing my own scenes
Right.
to develop as a writer. So I'm a writer because natively I make up stories. Like that's my default mode. That's how I
Yeah.
cope with life, how I cope with boredom. And it wasn't like I love language, I love words. Like that's why no, I
No.
like it fine. You know what I mean? But I'm not
It's a
like
means to an
overly
end.
passionate about the language or the words. I'm really passionate about the story. And so if the
Nice.
words are the way to tell the story, then that makes me passionate about the words.
Awesome. I like that. So I want to know, I'm trying to think what we have time for. Oh, my brother-in-law wanted to know, how do you go about researching mythological creatures?
For me, the research on mythological creatures is mostly a lifetime of being interested in mythological creatures.
Nice.
You know what I mean? Just reading lots of fantasy, watching fantasy movies, reading fantasy books, living fantasy in my head like almost all the time.
Nice.
That's my research. It's sort of like
Excellent.
there's like an old saying in writing of write what you know.
Right.
And that's an interesting saying to apply to dragons, and fantasy. Like, how do you write what you know and write a fantasy book?
Right.
And so I amend write what you know to write what you love.
Yes.
And I think that's actually more powerful than writing what you know. Write what you love, write what you're really into. And for some reason, ever since I was a little guy, I'm just really into fantasy. I really think it's cool. I kind of look around at the world and there's enough in the world where I'm like, get me out of here. Like
Right.
I want to go like with dwarves and dragons more than I want to like, go to some
Mm.
office. And
Right.
so um
Little vacation in your head.
yeah, and so it's the research is a lifetime of loving this stuff. That's the research mostly. And
Nice.
sometimes I'll get on, I'll specifically try to research something lightly, but it's more like I can research castles, I can research armor,
Right.
I can research maybe the tradition of how leprechauns have been told. But part of my fun is I'm going to do leprechauns my way.
Yes. Do
I'm going
your
to make
take
my
on them.
version of a fairy. I'm going to make my version of a centaur. So I want to know a little bit about what they are, and then I want to but it's fantasy, and the fun is I can make it my version of this, and that helps me bring something new to something ancient.
Yes, which makes it fun for the reader.
Yeah, right.
Excellent. Excellent. So what do you do in your free time when you're not taking vacations in your head and writing stories? What is it?
Mostly it's family.
Nice.
We're a blended family now. And so we have 11 kids. I married a lady with 7 kids. I had 4 kids. And so that takes up a lot of my free time in a way that I really enjoy. I love being a dad.
Awesome.
I love hanging out with the kids. I like playing tennis and pickleball. Racket sports is fun to me.
Oh, great.
But like I love getting outside. Like my wife likes to rock hound and hike around.
Cool.
And we've been doing that a lot. I love it.
Pigeon rock hounds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The candy shop floor.
Yeah.
I'd never heard that
Yeah,
term
that's right.
before.
That's right. That's why. Yeah, my real life is always
That's where
bleeding
the
into the books,
term
right?
came from. That's
Pigeon got
awesome.
into rock counting largely because my wife and I
Your
got into
wife.
rock counting.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's so cool. I love hearing how your life is in the books and it comes out
Yeah,
in
anyone
such
who's like
great
my
way.
friend or my kid, like my son Calvin, when he's reading Candy Shop War 3 right now, an
Yes.
advanced copy of it. And it just cracks him up because he's like, Dad, that's so your humor. Or Dad, like,
Nice.
yeah, you guys like to rock count. You guys found those crystals. Like
Well,
pigeons doing
that's
that
great
now.
that your kids read your books. That's good.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a cool way to bond. Like thank goodness most of them have really liked the books. So we bond
Good.
with them sometimes. Yeah, it's great.
Do any of them aspire to be writers?
I don't know if any of them aspire to be writers. They're all creative. My oldest is a pretty good little actress. Um, I don't know if any of them aspire to be writers per se, but they at least we all share liking to read. And who knows, you never know
Nice.
how someone will develop as they get older. So
Well, cool. It's so fun. All right. Well, one thing I love to do on my book huddles is to have my guests share one book that they would recommend to our viewers. What is a book that you can recommend? Any children's book?
yeah, any children's book to recommend. One of
Besides your own brilliant series, of course.
yeah. I think that makes that makes sense, right? One of my son Calvin, one of his very favorite books of all time is the book Holes,
Okay.
by Lewis Sacker,
Yeah.
and it is, and it's also one of my favorite books of all time. It is a children's book. It's original and it's cool. And I mean, this isn't an undiscovered book. This is a book a lot of people know, but the book Holes
Yeah.
is a terrific read. I think it's tight and smart and fun and really good book.
Excellent. And so one that you can also bond with your kid on.
Yep.
You have that
Yeah,
similar
we both
interest.
agree. We both like to talk about the story. I think reading with a kid is an amazing way to bond with a kid, or reading together as a family, or listening to an audiobook together as a family, because suddenly you have this shared context that you can talk about and make sense of, and there's all sorts of interaction that can be generated through that. Like, at least in my house, it really works. So
Oh, that's so fun. So what do you suggest though, because that could be a solution when you have a reading slump? I have a lot of people that constantly ask, how do I get my child to read or something? What do you say to somebody to get out of a reading slump?
it's exposing the kid to a variety of stuff, because sometimes it's just the right thing will catch. One
Yes.
kid might really like fantasy. One kid really might not connect to fantasy, but would connect to sports, or would connect to Diary of a Wimpy Kid. If you gave them kind of a graphic novel kind of thing, or so part of it is exposing them to a variety, and then part of it is just finding a story that you think is pretty good and sort of force feeding it to them, like in the sense of either you read it with them
Yes.
until they get interested, right? Because sometimes it's
Right.
just they're not interested because they haven't given it enough time to get interested. So
Right.
you read some chapters with the kid until the kid's into it, or you listen to the audiobook in a trapped environment, like on a family
The
trip
car.
or something.
Yes.
Yeah, like an audiobook is often preferable to staring out the window. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Or even staring at a game in your hand. You get a good audiobook going in the car with a captive audience, and suddenly they get into the story, and you might turn your kid into a reader right there.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I remember saying once when they were like, I don't want to listen to it. Well, I don't care. You don't have to listen to it. I'm just listening to it. You just happen to be in the back seat.
Sure, right. Hey, I'm the driver. I got to keep my mind alert and attentive to the road. This story helps me. So live with it, kids.
Yeah, we did that with Wizards of Once, and then they all really loved it.
That's great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and chatting with us today. And we will look forward to sharing Candy Shop War 3 with the world. I'm going to do for anybody who shares in the comments, you just have to comment on this video on YouTube. And I'm going to get on Amazon and pick somebody and just send out a free copy of Candy Shop War 3.
Cool. That's great.
And so, yeah, we're really excited to get started with that. And we can't wait. Tell me again the title of the next one, Hidden Kingdom.
The new thing. It's a working title, but
Okay.
The Forbidden Mountain.
Forbidden. That was way off. Forbidden Mountain
is the working title. Yeah.
Okay, but will we expect that in a couple of years then?
I'm working on it already. I'm about 10 chapters in. It'll probably come out next year sometime.
Oh, good. Oh, good. So something about a year ahead. Perfect.
About a year away. Yeah, and then that'll be the first of 3 books. I'm always working on future stuff. So just if you keep an eye on me, I'm at brandonmull.com. There'll always be some, every year there'll be a new book. That's my goal. So
perfect. Well, we're excited to read the next one. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Thanks for a great interview. It was nice talking to you.